one of our most interesting accomplishments, I feel, was the donation of a property. In 2004, we were donated a 10-acre piece of land, also in East Austin, actually in the Montopolis neighborhood, which was close to East Austin, that for 15 years had been used as just an illegal dump. It was absolutely covered in trash and debris. And the owner was looking to donate it to any nonprofit organization. And so we came across it and took on that piece of land, and we applied for a grant to the EPA, received a $200,000 grant from the EPA to clean up this property, and we removed something in the area of about 20 tons of debris from this site. Concrete chunks and rebar and metal and all sorts of debris, and separated it into piles based on its potential to be recycled. Our whole idea was, instead of taking this junk to someplace else, we were going to try and reuse as much of it as we could on the site. And that property is still owned by the Rhizome Collective. We actually put that the title, the ownership is in Rhizome Collective, which is a nonprofit 501c3 organization. So they still own that property right now, and that is likely to be the future of Rhizome Collective, is in Austin on this 10-acre piece of land. Which, I mean, again, the issue of access to land and land ownership is such a tricky issue. And I think that's one of our biggest successes in that regard, is that we demonstrated how it's possible for a nonprofit organization to have property donated to it without having to have undergone a capital campaign or to have gotten loans or a mortgage or a land loan or anything like that. Not that those are not valid strategies. In many cases, they're necessary. But this is one possible way, and who knows, it may be a 1 in 1,000 chance of that happening, but we actually did succeed in doing that. So I think it's encouraging just to know that, to have that model out there, that the possibility exists. And as part of that, we also put a lot of emphasis on talking to people in that community who lived around there, and as part of the grant, paying people to go door to door and talking to neighbors about what our intention was and what we had planned and what ideas, what they had for the land and what their relationship was with it. So that was also something that we emphasized a lot as well. Yeah, gentrification it's a huge issue. It's a very difficult issue because it is so complex and happens in so many different levels, and there's not really, from what I can gather, any clear consensus among the activist community, at least, about how to go about addressing it. There's so many different opinions and thoughts about it, but it's something that's really critical, particularly when the issue of creating sustainable communities or demonstrations of sustainability in urban areas, and how gentrification interacts with sustainability is something that's of a lot of interest to me. In fact, we wrote a whole section in our book, and something I'm definitely interested in exploring, mostly because so often the idea of green space or gardens or healthier communities are something that is seen as being a vanguard of gentrification that leads to the displacement of long-term communities, poor communities, typically communities of color in urban areas. And how unfortunate that is, because, yeah, everybody should be able to have gardens and public transportation and not have to live next to smelters and power stations and not have it result in increasing tax base and displacement in long-term communities. And how to find that balance is a really tricky thing, and particularly as by no means all of us, but a lot of us who are doing this work of creating sustainable demonstrations, sustainable infrastructure in urban areas, come from privileged backgrounds of white privilege. And what our role is in all of this, and what our responsibility is to be addressing these issues and be dealing with them of gentrification. And it's a tricky thing, and it's something I think a lot about, especially in Austin, like what ultimately was our impact on gentrification going on there? How were we complicit in it? What role did we play in it? How much did we do to counter it by being vocal and open about it? And then how much of it was happening anyway, regardless of what our influence was? How much of it is just centrally mandated and just comes as a consequence of downward economic pressure? These are really tricky questions, and there's a lot of ways to look at them. But, I think one important thing is when you're going into poorer communities or any community and just saying to yourself, if you are a white person of privilege, saying, yes, I am going to be contributing towards gentrification just by my being here. And just admitting that and then going with it from there rather than trying to, one, either deny that you're contributing to gentrification or just beating yourself to death about it also. You have to say, yes, I'm going to be contributing to it, but the question is, what am I going to be doing about addressing this issue? How am I going to be playing into it, and how am I going to be relating to the community that is here? Am I coming in here with a perspective that my culture, my ideals, my cultural capital that I carry with me is superior to that of the people who are there, and I'm going to be imposing mine upon them? Or am I going to try and coexist and fit in with the community that's already existing here? And trying to come into the approach of how can I work with this community? How can I somehow serve and be of an asset to them, in full awareness of the fact that my presence may lead to the gentrification of this neighborhood? And ultimately, how can sustainable racial hybridization occur in a way that's not going to lead to the displacement of people who are living there? And